They don't know what a nightmare is. They will.
Have you ever wanted more adaptations of The Most Dangerous Game? If the answer is yes, then you may want to check out I Am Rage. And this one stars Hannaj Bang Bendz as our main character, and is directed by David Ryan Keith, who also co-wrote the movie. Now this is a lower budget British movie, which, as I've mentioned, is more or less a unofficial retelling of The Most Dangerous Game. A story which has been retold countless times, I suppose, most notably Hard Target that starred Jean-Claude Van Damme, but there's been plenty of other adaptations. I personally like Slave Girls from Beyond Infinity, which is also another adaptation, but there's been countless other official and unofficial versions of this story. Now this one does try and add a couple of new elements to it, but let me give you the basic premise here. It focuses on these two women, both of whom have started dating one of each of these two brothers. And these two brothers are taking their new girlfriends to meet the family. And this family seems to live in some large stately home in the woods somewhere. But there's something a little bit off about them. And what that is that, well, as you can probably tell if you're familiar with The Most Dangerous Game, they like to hunt humans for sport. But that's not all in this case. They are also involved in some weird cult, where we have people walking around in horror masks and things. But they have also, on top of that, developed some type of scientific procedure where they can extract this blood which has been infused with high levels of adrenaline to prolong people's lives. So they market this as a product that they sell. So we have multiple motivations for our villains here. Now, what will happen? You will have to watch the movie and find out. So let's discuss what I think works for this movie. Now, this movie has been remade many times for a reason. It's a a good concept. Humans hunting humans. Yes, it's been done 100 times before. But it still is a fun concept, and I think that's probably why they keep making versions of this story. Just like, there's other movies that seem to spit out the same sort of story, like the Yojimbo story, the Magnificent Seven, Seven Samurai style stories. So, it's a tried and tested classic story. So there you go. Yes, it's not original. Let's just get it out of the way, but there it is. Now, this is a British movie which has been designed to sell to foreign audiences, primarily the US. And you see this a lot with British productions or low-budget indie movies, where they have an attempt here to have American characters with British actors speaking in American accents and things like this. And a lot of the time it's of variable quality, I will say. I have to say, I think this one does it better than most. I actually do think it comes across, it feels more like an American production in some ways. And I think it's partially because I think some of the accents are done a little better here, but also it's just look and feel. The production design here feels more like an American style and produced movie rather than some of the low budget British ones that I've reviewed here. So, it feels a little bit more slickly produced than some. Now, they wisely don't really specify where they are, so you could just say it's, it could be anywhere. But yeah, I actually do think the production looked very low budget movie, admittedly, but it didn't look too bad. I thought the production looked pretty slick. I actually quite like this the locale that they were shooting, this stately manner with this large ground and things like this, and it looks like it maybe is shot on a paintball course, possibly, because they have all these things that are built up like battlements and stuff like that. But I thought the location shooting was pretty good. It's also fairly action-packed. There's lots of action in this movie with variety of different fight scenes and hunts and things like that. And as I've mentioned, it does try to add a few original elements. So let me just give you a brief idea without really spoiling anything. So from our protagonist's point of view, the reason why this is called I Am Rage is because our lead protagonist, Hannaj Bang Bendz, I've forgotten her name now. Her character essentially is a woman who has, without spoiling anything, a kind of traumatic past, and she has really an uncontrollable kind of rage, which almost gives her like this boost of kind of almost superpowers, to be honest, where she has such high levels of adrenaline because of her past. So that kind of gives her as a character this kind of like one up than maybe the rest of the kind of the victims, and proves to be more of a challenge. And then we have the idea here that it's our kind of our bad guys, if you like, aren't just doing this for sport. They are actually doing this to try and harvest blood infused with adrenaline, and of course that means our main character is you know, the prize goal here, because her blood is so infused with adrenaline. And they also have this kind of this cult kind of thing going on as well. So it kind of has multiple things going on, so it adds a few extra kind of like details to the kind of story, rather it just being kind of like hunting for sport, so to speak. You know, I sort of quite like some of the characters here, I have to say. You know, it's a lower budget movie, and sometimes they can be guilty of lacking in a little bit of characterization. And I'm not saying this is like a masterclass in it, but I thought the actual, you know, you got a reasonable amount of kind of characterization here. I kind of quite liked our two kind of like protagonist kind of females, and the bad guys as well seem little hammy, I'll say, but I still kind of quite like them, and they did come across as, you know, evil and kind of dastardly and things like this, and even a little bit kind of perverse at times, so I sort of quite like that. And there's a reasonable amount of violence and gore, and a few kind of decent kills here. Okay, so what doesn't work? Now, I feel the extra elements here, without kind of spoiling really much, are really just window dressing, because they don't really amount to much. Let me just go through it again. I'm going to avoid spoilers here. So, you know, our main character has this kind of ability, shall we say, where she seems to essentially be able to Hulk out. And this is explained because she's had a traumatic event in her past. But it doesn't really explain how that works. You know, she just got a lot of adrenaline, but she can literally punch through someone's kind of rib cage and out the other side, just barehanded. It's like supernatural ability. She's like mega strong, but it's kind of never really, you know, given any more detail than she just has this kind of rage issues. And the flip side to that coin is I maybe would have liked to have seen the psychological aspect of that, being where she's just uncontrollable and she has this kind of rage and she's just like, you know, a whirlwind kind of going through, have this kind of uncontrollable rage. Very much like the Incredible Hulk. But she doesn't. She's composed, she's completely kind of like, you know, sure of what she's doing. So, you know, the rage is explained that she's basically just kind of super strong without having the kind of the, you know, that kind of psychological impact of it. Now, it's kind of explained to her that she's been living with this all her life and she's able to control it. But it's kind of, it's not really rage then, is it? It's kind of more, she's just kind of super strong. And I would have thought, you know, she has, it would have been interesting to have, she has this ability that gives her a one-up, but it also comes with a cost, so she can't really control it. She doesn't really know what she's doing. And makes maybe poor decisions, or she's confusing his friends with foe. It seemed like a missed opportunity. What else is a missed opportunity here are these bad guys' extra elements. This cult thing is so limited. There's just kind of guys in robes with kind of like monster masks on walking around, and that's it. We get no other explanation about that. They're just these guys walking around looking like kind of like sort of satanic cultists, but we're giving no other details other than that. So it's a completely superfluous kind of addition. And then we have this the element where we're trying to extract this kind of blood and then drink it, but it's like they're literally just drinking blood, and this somehow gives them this kind of extra kind of like longevity in life. We don't really ever see. We just get told, oh yeah, we've been alive for, you know, 100 years or something like that. And again, it's just very kind of like surface level, and it's like, yeah, we'll have this element in it which immediately gives it a little bit more, you know, a little bit more kind of new stuff to be added to this story, but it's just not a lot is done with it. So I feel the original elements here that were introduced were ultimately a missed opportunity to kind of really differentiate this from any other kind of, you know, movie based on the kind of the most dangerous game, which there's a lot, you know, there's a lot of them. So I actually do think that the movie set itself up to be kind of a little bit more than it could have been, but then didn't kind of follow through with it. So there is that. Now, the acting. Our bad guys they just ham it up a little bit too much. I kind of like the characters because they almost come across like pantomime villains, and I quite like the kind of like some of the villains, like the mum character. I thought was a little bit interesting because she's kind of like they make her out to be a little bit sort of pervy almost, without kind of really kind of going too much into that. And there's like a neighbour who seems to be in there who's kind of somewhat of a comedic relief. But otherwise, they seem a little bit too kind of like, I mean, the dialogue here is kind of quite cringeworthy, I've got to say. So, I mean, it's a kind of a mix between some quite poor dialogue and some hammy acting. It's very, very kind of like hammy, to be honest with you. I didn't think our protagonists were too bad. I just didn't think they were particularly well written. But the acting and the delivery of some of these lines is kind of quite poor. The movie is kind of low budget, and you know, there are some kind of effects here where you feel like more could have been done with kind of the gore and the kind of the violent side. And there's also little explanation about how our main character is like an expert kind of fighter, especially, which I won't reveal here, but especially when you find out the circumstances which have led to her being so kind of violent. You understand that could be an issue, but it doesn't really explain how she's like a MMA fighter with like clearly kind of training and things like this. So, you know, it ends up being very much a kind of a B movie, and it doesn't really kind of end up, elements that are kind of introduced and they end up kind of squandering. It ultimately though is still somewhat of a fun movie. As I've mentioned, I actually quite like The Most Dangerous Game as a concept, and you know, it is what it is. Yes, it's not original, it's clearly just kind of like rehashing that kind of storyline, and the elements that it does introduce are kind of wasted, but it is still a fun movie. It has a reasonable amount of kind of action sequences. They're kind of, you know, it's quite well paced in that regard, and I do think it looks like it's fairly well sort of put together for a kind of a lower budget. So I don't think this is a bad film. I don't think it really excels in any particular way. So therefore I'll kind of say it's like an average kind of film. So I'll give it a 5 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.